Okay, we are live and we'll be starting now. So hello everyone, my name is Uswa Ahmed and I'm the National Coordinator Pakistan of IVCoM and IVCOM Pakistan. I welcome you all. Hold on a second. Sorry about that, some trouble with the YouTube Live. So I welcome you all to the first session of the virtual conference towards change and innovation, museums, sustainability, and well-being. As the moderator for this conference, I am honored to guide our discussion and facilitate the exchange of ideas among esteemed experts and participants from around the world. In our panel today, I welcome Lauren Wheeler, Strategic Services Director of the Alberta Museums Association, Melody Caban, nonprofit consultant, and Shannon Walker, University Archivist at the Arizona State University. Unfortunately, Hilary Spencer, co-chair of ICOM's International Committee for Exhibition Exchange, has met with an accident and will be unable to join us today. She's on bed rest and taking medication, and we wish her a swift recovery. So this conference coincides with the International Museum Day theme for this year, which is Museum Sustainability and Wellbeing, in an effort to revive IVCoM, a project jointly launched by international museum professionals and ICOM Pakistan during the COVID-19 pandemic. With this initiative, ICOM Pakistan has led several discussions in the form of virtual conferences on topics including preventive conservation of collections in the museums, prevention of illicit trade of cultural objects, museum education, among other varied topics. Today, we will look more closely at how museums and cultural organizations are embracing innovative and sustainable practices, from exhibitions and digital archives to museum stores, developing policies and embracing social, economic, and environmental sustainability in every aspect of their operations. I am honored to introduce our very first speaker for today, Lauren Wheeler, Strategic Services Director of the Alberta Museums Association. Lauren is a public historian with over 20 years of experience in a wide range of museums and heritage institutions in Alberta, Canada. She holds a Master's of Arts degree in Public History from Carleton University in Ottawa and focuses her research on visuality, environment, and outdoor recreation in Western Canada. Lauren started working with the Alberta Museums Association in 2013 as the program lead overseeing accreditation through the recognized museum program. Lauren also took on the role of Strategic Services Director in 2021 and is the lead on the AMA's environmental initiatives, including work to reduce the institution's greenhouse gas emissions. A settler to Canada, Lauren was raised in Canmore in Treaty 7 territory and has resided in Edmonton in Treaty 6 territory since 2008. So without much delay, Lauren, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can see what I see. There we go. All right. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It is great to be here today. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the Alberta Museums Association serves museums and museum professionals living and working in the lands covered by the numbered treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10. These are the traditional meeting grounds and current home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Niitsitapi, also known as the Blackfoot, the Métis, Nakota Sioux, Tsuut'ina, Dene, and Inuit people. Our offices are located in Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta. We work in the spirit of reconciliation to be good relations to the human and non-human inhabitants of this land, water, and air. So I just wanted to take a second to situate where Alberta is within Canada, recognizing that not everyone may be familiar with our geography here in Canada. Just give me 1 second. There we go. So Alberta is the pink part outlined on this map here. We're a fairly small country by population, but large by land. Alberta has a population of about 4.2 million people as of 2021, but we do represent a fairly diverse landscapes and ecosystems. As you can see by the three images on the right, most of our ecosystems here are prairie, boreal plains, boreal forest, mountains, and a lot of our population actually doesn't live in the rural areas, but 85% is living in urban centers, most of those in our two major cities of Edmonton and Calgary. And the bottom image on the screen is of Edmonton and its river valley in the winter. So the Alberta Museums Association, or AMA, was founded in 1971 as a nonprofit society through which museums and museum workers could meet for the benefit of Alberta's developing museum community. Today, the AMA counts more than 200 institutional members and 250 individual members from across Alberta. We offer a variety of programs and services, including our standards-based accreditation program, the Recognized Museum Program, a certificate in museum studies program, and a series of grants for institutions and individuals. We also create and maintain a wide range of publications and resources, including our standard practices for museums, third edition, our Help Emergency Preparedness Manual for Museums, and our Climate Action for Museums Toolkit. We are part of a network of provincial and territorial museums associations across Canada, all unique in our programs and services, but all working together to support our diverse museums and museum professionals. The map on the right shows the locations of our institutional members as identified by a yellow star. I like to show this map to give a visual of how spread out our membership is and how diverse environment-wise our museums are coming from. The majority of our members institutionally are in rural areas, even though the majority of Alberta's population lives in urban centers. And that makes it interesting for us as an association when we start trying to tackle things like environmental sustainability, because the pressures of environmental sustainability on rural institutions can be quite different from those in urban areas. And the mentality around environmental sustainability and specifically climate change is quite different often in the rural and urban areas. So the AMA roots everything that we do in what we call our pathway of change. The best way to think about the pathway is like the ripple caused by a rock that's dropped into a pond. The ripple starts with the AMA as an institution, changing the way we act, think, and provide our services, modeling those changes to our membership so that they can change the way they act, think, and provide their programs, so that then the communities they're providing those programs to see what they're doing as different and continue that change effect, rippling across the pond. It's important for us as an institution that anything we ask of our members, we do ourselves and we model ourselves. So any changes that we want to see happen that will support the sustainability and resilience of our sector are things that we ourselves are doing as an institution. And this is part of that pathway of change. One of the most important pieces within our pathway of change right now is actually our Sustainability Working Group report and the 5 facets of sustainability. So this report was released in 2013 and identified 5 facets that create sustainable and resilient museums, specifically within the context of our province. Our 5 facets are social, cultural, health and well-being, financial, and environmental. And the image that you see on the screen with the connecting arrows kind of going all over the place is based on the idea that if all these facets are connected, and the report outlines the importance of considering all 5 areas when addressing shortcomings or needs for change in one. If you want to work on environmental, it's going to have an impact on your financial, social, cultural, and health and well-being facets as well. We've incorporated the 5 facets and the overall message of the report into all of our programs and services. And over the past 10 years, we've seen that integration start to create more resilient and sustainable organizations within our province from those who've embraced this approach to change. Some of these facets our institutions have found very easy to approach, and others are a bit trickier. The two that we find need the most support are health and well-being and environment. So today I'm going to focus in on what we as an organization have been doing around that environmental sustainability and our most recent piece to go with it. So the Sustainability Working Group report defines environmental sustainability as working to ensure the surroundings in which an organization operates, including air, water, land, natural resources, flora, fauna, humans, the built environment, and their interrelations are supported successfully for the long term. So anything that we're doing as an organization about environmental sustainability is rooted in this particular definition of it. It underpins everything that we've done and everything that we look for in our pathway of change. And it's important for us as an organization that we're modeling to our members what this can look like for an institution. And it's to that end that we were embarked on a number of greening campaigns that have allowed us to model best practice in support of our Climate Action for Museums toolkit. So the toolkit really started with our own work to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through the City of Edmonton's Corporate Climate Leadership Program. We enrolled in the program in 2019 as part of its second cohort and began our work in early 2020. You can see here some of the 64 institutions that are participants in the program. What the program does is asks each participant to carefully track and benchmark their greenhouse gas emissions through a number of areas of their operations. After the benchmarking work is done, we do emissions reduction goal setting, and then we keep tracking to make sure that we're on that right path. It's part of the City of Edmonton's overall goal of becoming climate or a sum zero city by 2035, and it's a big goal. So the more institutions they can get on board for the Corporate Climate Leadership Program, the more likely the city is to meet that work. The formulas and the support for completing our inventories and target setting is facilitated by the nonprofit group Green Economy Canada. And it's through working closely with them on our own inventories and reduction targets that we developed a relationship that led to the climate toolkit. So this gives you just a quick look at our own our greenhouse gas reduction work. So once we baselined our own emissions, we continue tracking to see how changes we were making were impacting on having those numbers go down. And I realize the bottom line is hard to read here, it being yellow. But the bottom line of the chart is the option for reducing emissions by 50% by 2035. The blue line is for 15% reduction, and the purple line is science aligned to prevent an increase in the Earth's temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius. What we learned in working with Green Economy Canada was that we were already taking steps that put us in line with the 15 and 50% reductions. So as an institution, we're currently working towards that science-aligned reduction target, and we are short 2 credits in our reductions right now and just working to find where we can get those. So coming out of working with Green Economy Canada, and it's with support from a grant from the Edmonton Community Foundation specifically for environmental programming, we started looking at how we could support Alberta museums. And the first step was in early 2021, working with 5 institutions in Edmonton on a series of workshops to introduce the idea of greenhouse gas emissions reduction and tracking emissions to them. Our 5 pilot sites for these workshops were the Alberta Aviation Museum, the Art Gallery of Alberta, the Musée Héritage Museum in St. Albert, the Strathcona County Museum in Sherwood Park, and the TELUS World of Science, Edmonton. Over the course of 3 workshops, these participants from these institutions tackled understanding their baseline emissions, setting realistic reduction goals, and then general sustainability considerations using resources developed by Green Economy Canada. So here's an example of the emissions discovery workbook that the pilot sites were able to use. As you can see, it's quite intense. It looks at everything from your building envelope, control systems, HVAC, lighting, fleet vehicles, electrical equipment, employee commuting, business travel, paper, waste disposal, product transportation, and water consumption. All of these things that have connections to potential greenhouse gas emissions. The workbook is developed by Green Economy Canada, so you put in your numbers and it tells you where you're at in terms of emissions. And it lets you put in numbers over a course of years so you can see what your baseline is and then how you're progressing towards a emissions reduction goal. So the first workshop looked at the workbook. The second focused on understanding how to identify potential greenhouse gas emission reductions. And the third took a step back from greenhouse gas emissions to look at overall sustainability and specifically in the museum sector. So for that, Green Economy Canada created a sustainable projects cheat sheet specifically for museums that looked at very museum specific pieces like emission or exhibits and installation, food service and restaurants, and asked the participants to think about key considerations, what important data they would need to understand the emissions from that, common activities that can help make reductions, and then their space for their own reflections on the work they're doing or work that they could be doing. And it's really from this step back, from that big picture look at how corporations as wholes can reduce emissions to how can museums specifically reduce emissions, that the Climate Action Toolkit was created. So here you'll see what the cover of our PDF of the Climate Action Toolkit looks like. Coming out of our workshops with Green Economy Canada, there were a few things that really stood out for them and for us. The first one was that when they would suggest changes in the workshop for reducing emissions by doing things like switching to LED lights, putting lights on timers, limiting temperature ranges for interior spaces, and avoiding too much heating and cooling, the participants said, well, that's what we already do. It's pretty standard practice for museums to, have low light levels and have lights on timers and be looking to maintain as stable an environment as possible within their spaces. This is all part of good preventive conservation and care of collections. And I think it surprised Green Economy Canada a little bit that something that sometimes they have to really push organizations to do and invest money in, the museums were already doing because it's part of our best practice. It was also interesting to hear the conversations that happened around things like reusing materials from one exhibit to another, which is something a lot of museums, big and small, do because it's a cost saver. So when we started looking at putting together the toolkit, the conversations that happened in the workshops were really important for reframing what Green Economy Canada presents as a generic package to a museum-specific audience. The workshop conversations also identified some areas that were going to be stumbling blocks that we needed to figure out a way to address within the toolkit. And that included one of our participants who operates out of a designated heritage building that they don't own, the municipality owns. So there were restrictions for them on the sorts of repairs they can do, the kinds of upgrades that they can do to their HVAC system, and a municipal bureaucracy around something as simple as just getting a furnace fixed, let alone getting it replaced with something that's from this century. And it was those kind of conversations that really helped us understand the depth of what we had to go into to make a toolkit specific to museums. We also wanted to make sure that while giving museums resources to look at their climate action through the lens of greenhouse gas emission reductions, it was also something that would resonate with museums big and small. Something we often hear in Alberta, because the majority of our museums are operating on budgets of less than $250,000 a year, is that what works for the big ones doesn't work for the small ones. And when we say small, we mean museums that are lucky to have one permanent staff for full-time for the year. When we looked at the final toolkit, we wanted to walk institutions through. We wanted to walk them not just through the rationale for reducing emissions from an environmental perspective, but also from a business perspective. For our museums and our museum professionals who maybe aren't convinced that climate change is caused by humans, there had to be a second sell for them. There had to be a business cost of doing business rationale for making these changes and investing in this, not just a let's save the planet so we have a place to live pitch. So here you'll see the main parts of the climate action toolkit, starting with the business case for sustainability, that hard pitch for your bottom line of, if you do this, it will save you money in the long run. How to get started, how to identify your impacts, developing your action plan, setting meaningful targets for reduction, marking your progress, and then 3 appendix documents: the sustainable projects cheat sheet that I showed you a bit of earlier, a guide to a green team, and the green team toolkits. The perspective, or the approach that Green Economy Canada takes and that we're promoting in the toolkit is really so centered on having a green team. So that's a group of people in your organization from all parts of it and all levels that meet to work on emissions reductions, target setting, but also to build a culture of environmental sustainability within your organization. It was also super important for us that we had 3 key considerations addressed within the toolkit. The first one was that it needed to be accessible and gentle. We had learned from comments following a conference on sustainability in 2018 that some of our members had really strong feelings about climate action. And it was important for us that the rationale not just come off as preaching environmental sustainability or climate change. It had to have that clear, strong business case for taking action. And Green Economy Canada was able to bring that with their depth of research. The second consideration was that it had to highlight examples from smaller museums, not just big ones. So on the screen here, you'll see one of our local case studies, which is the Kerrywood Nature Center, located in Red Deer, who's been working towards environmental sustainability for almost 20 years now, since their first solar installation back in 2005. The third piece was that we wanted to be relevant outside Alberta too. We might be serving the museums within our province, but because we're part of that network of provincial and territorial museums associations, we wanted something that could also be used in British Columbia or Ontario or Quebec or in the Yukon. What we've been seeing so far is that those who are interested in taking climate actions are finding the toolkit very useful, but we do know that we have a lot of work to do on further promoting it. The timing of when the toolkit came out in 2021 wasn't great. We were still kind of in the middle of lockdowns and not knowing when we'd be open full time here as a sector in Alberta. So going into the future years, we'll be looking at ways to continue this work. I'm happy to answer any questions if you'd like to send me an email or take a look at the toolkit in our document library on our website, available here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for such a fantastic presentation and sharing the best practices at the AMA and the collaborative projects and initiatives that have been taking place, not only on the micro level, but on the macro level as well. You talked about the pathway of change, and I loved the analogy of a ripple caused by a rock dropped in the pond. And I think it's a really great framework for other institutions and not just museums to follow. So thank you for such a wonderful presentation. And next, I'd like to introduce Melody Caban. And just before I hand over the mic to her, I'd like to speak a little about her background. She's an experienced consultant who specializes in bringing an innovative eye to nonprofit retail operations. With over 10 years of experience, she has been a speaker at numerous conferences, including with the Museum Store Association in the US and the Association for Cultural Enterprises in Scotland. Her institution's stores have also been featured in local and national media, including USA Today. Melody's unwavering advocacy for inclusivity and sustainability in museum stores is grounded in her belief that they can significantly contribute not only to a museum's revenue, but also to their vision and mission. Melody, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to ICOM Pakistan and IVCoM for having me today. Let me get this screen shared here and we'll get going there. Perfect. So I want to welcome you to my catchy named talk here. It's in the bag. Museum stores as catalysts for sustainability and inclusivity. Like Uswa said, I am Melody Caban. I've worked in everything from private to corporate to government entities. So I've really worked with a variety of different museums and gotten to know the best practices for them and really where they're going to be going to in the future. So why museum stores? A lot of your institutions will have museum stores. Many of them might not have a seat at the table yet. So why include them at that seat at the table here? Well, when our new visitors come, a lot of it can be pretty overwhelming to visit a museum. You're trying to learn, do this, that. You don't know the practices yet. But when you come to a museum store, we've all shopped. We know how to pick up those items, look at the products. You also have those employees there that you can ask questions of, get to know in a way that the rest of the museum might not be able to offer. Here you can also find those products that set you apart. No other store is going to have a product mix like you because it's about your museum's mission. And when they shop at a museum store, your mission goes to their home, to their friends, to their family, and really lives outside the walls of the museum. So that's why museum stores, to start with, have to be included in that conversation, no matter what it might be. So mission. Mission is what really sets museum stores apart, right? We are a part of the museum. We speak about the values of a museum, the exhibition values you might have, and we should feel like an extension of that experience. If it doesn't quite yet, that's one of those points that will really enrich the visit for your visitors, to have a museum store that's integral and a part of your museum. And really, when it comes to mission, the most important pieces I've been seeing are sustainability and inclusivity. It's so wonderful to be able to highlight those in a museum store. And it really gives that tactile quality of your mission in product form, in store form, that someone can really understand and be a part of. So some numbers, and we can talk about the feelings of it all day long, but the numbers make such an impact. So if a visitor at your museum visits the museum store, they're 7 points more likely to have it be satisfied with their visit. That's huge. And also they're 11 points higher, more likely to come back to your museum within a year. That right there makes a huge difference in your visitation, in your donations, in people shopping in the museum, and your impact in a community. And these numbers from Colleen Dillenschneider really just right off the bat set off the impact a museum store can make. So what are we going to talk about today? For museum sustainability, it'll be products and then our store separately. So a couple more numbers. If you can't tell, I'm a numbers person. It's always nice to have that in your back pocket. Really, with sustainability, it makes such an impact, not just speaking of your mission, but what your visitors want. If you're looking for those younger visitors, your Gen Z, your millennials, 80% of them are willing to pay more for sustainable products. It's front of mind, it's a core value. They want to know that you also value this and show that off in your products in the store. And of course, we have a good amount of our revenues at our museums. The MSA, Museum Store Association numbers there, 5 to 25% come from museum stores. Imagine what it could be like if you could bump that up by having better sales, by having more visitors in your museum. It can really change how it works and change the impact of the museum. Beautiful. So I want to start you off with some products. Products, imagine these sustainable products, forget about what you've known about them in the past. It's a whole new world of sustainable products now. Recycled is not just that one look they might have had 20 years ago. Recycled is now coming in a variety of different price points, from our Flipboku flip books that are techie VR flip books. So you can imagine the paintings when you scan these flip books, and they're made out of recycled paper. to all the way you head off over to our recycled silver jewelry. You're getting luxury recycled items now. So your store doesn't have to be in this sort of niche of looking recycled. It's just that these products happen to be recycled now, and you can tell that story to all of your visitors to add one more layer of importance to those products. I mean, if you already love this pin, it's just even more interesting that it's 3D printed, that it's recycled, and that when you get tired of it, you can actually recycle it again. And adding those layers just really sets you apart from a lot of the retail that other visitors will be experiencing day to day. Now let's see, sustainable and fair trade. Really, sustainable and fair trade are about looking at the future and working, creating these pieces that won't hurt future generations. So at first glance, these are all just beautiful products. This beautiful feather bow tie, these interesting pink salmon pieces, and this cute coin purse. But then you look again, and you get that second level of story. You're getting that these feathers are actually sustainably sourced. No birds were hurt with them. The feathers were molted, and so they're able to pick them and hand create this beautiful bow tie. That's going to be one of a kind. You can tell your customers if you don't get it now, that favorite bow tie won't exist when it's sold, because it'll be different every time. And you'll see here the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. They have the candied wild pink salmon, and this is all from registered freshwater marine fisheries. It's sustainable standards. So people will understand with those stories built into those products and the packaging, why things might cost a bit more and why they should invest in those products. Across the screen here, also these products will be giving back to people, to these small businesses, to the handmade makers here. And that, again and again, has created a really important way to showcase why it's important to shop with museum stores. This variety I've never seen at other stores. It's always those museum shops that I visit, and I visit them all. That makes them so interesting. So plastic reduction. It's always interesting to look at plastic reduction because it's taken in different ways. You'll see here this Best Year's dinosaur actually is now shipped without plastic bags because they weren't really quite helping, and yet being able to cut down on that plastic packaging has made their products greener because they're made already from sustainable natural materials, and now they've cut back on unnecessary packaging. It's wonderful to ask your vendors why something is happening and can this change. It's really that push that helps folks move ahead. They might think that customers might not want it, but working with vendors and buyers together, these changes can occur. So looking here, we have also the food bags from the Huntington store that is really about reducing waste by using packaging to be as a food bag to be reused, or our plastic reduction books here. So really it's going from home to children's to books. There's really no reason an item can't have a level of sustainability in your store. Take a look, talk to your vendors, make a plan and see what percentage of your products have sustainability in them. A lot of times you might not even know that some items are made out of recycled paper or made from certain items. Make sure you get that story, because having signage, having merchandising that explains this is valuable not just to your store, but to your visitors and to your shoppers. All right, sustainable stores. So just like Lauren was saying, it really depends on where you're starting at. Are you big? Are you small? It really depends where you're starting. But again, it's about questioning things that we take for granted. What kind of bags are you using? Are they locally sourced? Are they coming from abroad? Are they plastic? Are they paper? Are you printing every single receipt? Can you opt to have those receipts not be printed every time and go digital on that source? Or are you starting from scratch so you can really go from LEED design standards and start from the bottom up, from your flooring to your ceiling, to choose greener store sustainable items? It depends on where you're starting with, but no matter where you are, the thing is you can make some changes that will help that out. And not only will that help your store become more beautiful, more sustainable, it'll help your bottom line. It'll make it easier to bring these items in. They'll last longer. It'll cut down on your fees, and also your staff appreciate it. I know I worked with a lot of Gen Z and millennial staff, and the waste that we had was always top of mind for them. And having a sustainable store really does make a difference in them wanting to be and work at your store. Perfect. So let's take a look at inclusivity. This was my take on the well-being. Well-being is such a broad area, and I could probably talk all day on this also. But inclusivity, I'm going to be breaking that down into diversity in the stores, really welcoming everyone, and how to create a space for well-being. Each one of those pieces is something that will move your store towards becoming stronger, making more money, and really getting that mission of your museum and moving it forward with your customers. Also, I'll throw out there too, including sustainability, inclusivity, and everything has actually really helped me with marketing, organic marketing, and getting featured in different types of media. Because this is exactly what folks are looking for. They're looking for something different, something thoughtful that can't be found elsewhere. And you can really become a source for that. All right, so inclusivity in the numbers. So 2/5 of customers experience discrimination based on their race or skin color in a store, which is a shocking amount. And the majority of those won't be mentioning that to you there at the store. Also, 2/3 of Americans say social values shape their shopping choices. That's 66% of shoppers keeping that in mind as part of their core values, as something that they keep in mind with every purchase they're making. And that can really help them change a no from a yes in purchasing in your store. So make sure that you're not just making these changes, but that you're saying them out loud and very proudly, that you are taking the time to buy differently now. And of course, if you want those shoppers, those young shoppers to come in, we know our development departments and everybody wants those younger visitors to be coming into our museums. Again, this is one of those areas that really helps showcase you as thought leaders in the community and having that inclusive bent to the museum store, and not just be more an action, not just a conversation. And of course, we all know it. When you walk into a museum, 45% of folks reported a drop in stress just being in a museum. Our museums are places of well-being, whether we're trying or not. It starts as a space where people want to come and breathe and experience a museum. And it's really about, what can we do with that? How can we make it an even better space for folks to come and visit? All right, so diversity. I've got a great mix of products here. First, it's really about showcasing. You'll see that these products are very different. They're varied, and they don't just speak to diversity itself. They're beautiful products. They're different, they're unique, and they're the kind of things that people will come back and shop for again and again. The first one is Untitled Union. This company only works with BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color artists around the world to create their artworks for their items. So this beautiful notebook is at the Cummer Museum. It's just a wonderful floral notebook. And again, so you have that layer of beautiful notebook, beautiful artwork, and then you have diversity on top of that. You can really showcase the value of this item. Or this pin that was designed with the artist Jordan Bennett, highlighting his culture, highlighting his language, and then taking a fun spin on that Star Wars wording there. So it's a modern take on looking at culture and looking at language, because all of these pieces are not about antiquity. This is modern humanity. This is modern culture, and it is here with us. And of course, looking at stories that may not have been told in the past. This book, Twice as Hard at the Mutter Museum, is a wonderful book showcasing how the fight for Black women to become physicians, and really showcases where, again, diversity doesn't have to come in one flavor of just a book, just this. You can look at diversity and add it all across the board to be able to highlight your local cultures, local communities, or definitely pairing with exhibitions and working with folks to expand that experience into the store. And all are welcome. Everyone has different communities that work with their museums and visit the museum. So it really depends on who you have coming to the museum that you might want to change things around the shop to make sure that they are all welcome. Here are a couple that I've worked with in the past. So neurodiversity. I know a lot of my education departments have created days for like autism or working with certain groups. And I love to bring in these products to really welcome them in and showcase that this is a store. You can touch, you can feel, you can enjoy the store. It's as much a store for them as it is for you. And think about, especially with our neurodiversity, can you create quiet hours for folks to shop in? What can you do to make it more welcoming? Blindness. So this beautiful clock is actually made by the Chicago Lighthouse. They serve blind, visually impaired, disabled, and veteran communities. And it just is a wonderful showcase piece to have there. And with this, think about for this community, how you can train your staff. There might be blind visitors. How do you count out money in the shop for them? How can you train to be able to make sure that folks feel welcome in the shop? And color blindness at the end there. So 8% of the population is colorblind. That it's a huge amount. And we, of course, have seen those Enchroma glasses, as you have here, that folks are now selling in stores sometime. But something as simple as having your store signage be easy to read for those that are colorblind. Make sure that you have that contrast so it's easy to read for them. Is a huge step forward in helping and keeping that in mind. With almost 1 out of every 10 folks being colorblind, you have to really think about the amount of visitors that come in and how many can be affected by that. So those are just a couple simple steps that make sure that you keep folks in mind when coming to your museum store, and that they are all welcome and they can feel a sense of well-being shopping there. So creating a space for well-being. This is one of my favorite spaces to speak of, because we have our products. Those take a lot of work to create, to find, to source. But really, your biggest secret weapon is your store staff. You have to treat them as important as they are. They are your welcoming crew. They are the ones that understand your products better than anybody else. You have to really invest the time, the attention, and have those open conversations with your staff. Because if you don't have that well-being with them, it's difficult for them to create that well-being with your visitors. really, and also with staff, you're going to be having staff of all generations, right? From those Gen Zers to baby boomers across the table, they're all going to need a little something different from you. And that's okay, because so will your customers. They'll all need something a little different, and folks can give you better insights into their generations and how they work. It's really a two-way street of learning, changing, creating a better space for everybody. So tell stories. I've talked about creating those multi-levels of stories for those products. It's one of those things where we can't assume folks know. You have very small amount of time to create an impression on those visitors. But creating those stories, be it signage, be it a merchandising display, be it a video or a setup online on your online store. I loved putting little videos on there, or creating a dialogue that your staff can say, like, oh, of course, that necklace is actually made locally by Ange. It's recycled this and that, and you will not find it anywhere else but here. And it saves this much in waste when created this way. Having all of that adds the value to your products that you need to make sure that your margins are wonderful, that your sales are swift, and people are ready to tell their friends to come shop and come to the museum also, right? So last here is listen and learn. We really need to take that time to listen and learn from staff and from visitors. One of my favorite things to do was to shop my own stores, to really become a customer and see the interactions that were happening around, or just sit back and see those interactions and see where I might be failing. I might need a product moved. Someone might not have the clarity on an item. Listening and learning to community that is shopping in your stores is huge for understanding what ways you can grow and be better for them. And of course, when we're looking at all of these, it's really important to work with the rest of the museum. Having a seat at the table as a museum store means working with exhibition to create that sustainable product for their next exhibit, working with education to bring those environmentally friendly books for their summer reading program. It means working with visitor services, because people keep saying they wish they had this thing in the store, but you would have had no idea unless you had opened up that conversation. It's going to be it's a lot of work and growth, but just committing to this will create a much better experience to welcome our visitors. So these are a couple questions to ask yourself here. Of course, not everything will pertain to you from those slides, but open it up to yourself. So what percentage of your store products are sustainable? What questions are we asking vendors to fulfill our missions? Come in with those missions and talk to them about what you need from them. They won't know unless you bring it up. How are we working towards welcoming everyone to the store? Who is being left out? And what are we losing out on by not making this a priority? There's a lot of priorities on our list for museum stores, but having these points be a priority will really be a ripple to affect everything else that you're doing in the shop, and can really strengthen who the museum store is to the community and to the museum as a whole. So thank you so much. Please feel free to ask any questions there, and here's some information if you'd like to reach out. Thank you so much. Let me see. Good stop.
Thank you, Melody, for such a wonderful presentation and sharing your expertise on how museum stores are driving change and making a significant impact, and also supporting small businesses. And understanding visitor demographics is really important. You mentioned about listening and learning, and I feel that these are really valid points. And we're especially looking more at reducing plastics and promoting recycling and raising awareness on social responsibility and looking at sustainability in terms of inclusivity and diversity as well. Thank you, Melody. Next, our final speaker for today. I'm very excited about introducing my mentor, my teacher, who I've had the privilege of working with in the past year at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at the Arizona State University. Shannon Walker is currently the university archivist at the Arizona State University. She oversees the collections and programs of university archives, specializing in the history of the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Prior to ASU, she worked in the Western History and Genealogy Department at the Denver Public Library and at the Getty Conservation Institute Library in LA. She received her MLIS from the University of Denver and has a dual degree in history and anthropology from the University of Colorado Boulder. Shannon is interested in the intersection of libraries, archives, and museums, and the presentation, preservation, and personalization of cultural heritage. Thank you, Shannon, for being here today, and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Uswa. I appreciate your introduction, and it's good to see you. So I think hopefully there'll be a few things that you're very excited about in this presentation. So, but hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm just making sure you see my presentation there. My name is Shannon Walker, as Uswa said. I am currently the University Archivist at Arizona State University. For those of you who may not be familiar, we're located in Phoenix, Arizona, in the southwestern United States. I've been working in museums, libraries, and archives for over 20 years, and I'm passionate about the intersection of these fields. So before we begin, I wanted to read our land acknowledgement here. So the ASU Library acknowledges that the 23 Native nations that have inhabited this land for centuries. Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on ancestral territories of indigenous peoples, including the Acomel-O'odham, Pima, and Peepash or Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands allow us to be here today. The ASU Library acknowledges the sovereignty of these nations and seeks to foster an environment of success and possibility for Native American students and patrons. We're advocates for the incorporation of Indigenous knowledge systems and research methodologies within contemporary library practice. ASU Library welcomes members of the Acomel-O'odham and Peepash and all Native nations to the library. So I want to start out with a little bit of a definition of what is a museum, because you'll see from what I'm going to share today, we may not be a traditional of what you think might be a museum. So I won't read the whole thing, but I do want to focus just sort of on the last part that I've highlighted here, which says that a museum, a purpose of a museum and the experience of being in a museum serves for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. And I can think that once I present sort of this case study today, you'll see that's where we end up. So in some ways, the subtitle for my presentation can be, this is how we became a museum, kind of the concept of it, the story. So what I'm going to speak about mostly is talking about cultural sustainability and well-being. And those concepts, of course, can be applied more broadly to museums and other cultural heritage institutions. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history. Here's actually one more slide, sorry. Just that definition of cultural sustainability. There's many definitions. This is one sort of I found and kind of became an anchor for this presentation. It talks about cultural sustainability as it relates to sustainable development or to sustainability, has to do with maintaining cultural beliefs, cultural practices, heritage conservation, culture as its own entity, and the question of whether or not any given cultures will exist in the future. In this case, what I'm going to speak about today is the culture of a specific institution and sort of the ups and downs that we had and how cultural heritage, art, archives, and things like that have really contributed to that cultural sustainability. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a history. So I'm going to speak about the Thunderbird School of Global Management, which you may or may not have heard of. You can, in your own time, Google it. There's lots of good stuff out there about it. But the school was founded in 1946 in a suburb of Phoenix. It was one of the first schools aimed at educating and training men and women for international business. The unique curriculum also included, beyond business classes, classes in culture and language, recognizing that if people were to work abroad, they would need to have that diverse education. The school has an international reputation and continually places high in graduate school rankings. It's been around for over 70 years, 75 years now. Over the course of the history of the school acquired, mostly through alumni donations, a significant international folk art collection. You can see a picture of that here, some of what was on display on the campus. The collection contained various types of artwork, including textiles, photographs, three-dimensional objects, paintings. As I mentioned before, some were donations or contributions from alumni who were traveling or lived abroad and brought these back to the campus. Other objects were gifted to the school's president or other administrative. And in a lot of ways, all of the objects came to represent relationships or significant milestones of the school. In total, there are probably about 600 objects in the collection. Let's see, some more pictures. So more examples of the art. The artwork was distributed throughout the campus in probably a dozen buildings, with more displayable art or the kind of favorites featured in the library and the main administration building. Staff, faculty, and students, alumni, visitors all commented on the art and appreciated the art, and many had favorites that they looked for on subsequent visits. Aesthetically, it created a global atmosphere in a small parcel of land in suburban Phoenix. It was very unique. The school itself is often referred to as a little United Nations, partially because of the demographics of the student population and the focus on international business, but it's enhanced by that international artwork. And in many ways, these global pieces became part of the school's brand and the school's identity. So then we're going to talk about a few changes and disruptions to this culture. The fall of 2014, an announcement was made that the school was merging with Arizona State University, one of the larger public institutions in the state, after a review of Thunderbird's overall financial health. This was a significant announcement, as the school had been independent and private up to this point, and the school went through several rounds of resizing, and student enrollment drastically declined. A couple of years later, in 2017, it was announced that the campus was moving from its original location to a downtown Phoenix area. So you got to keep in mind that they had been on that campus in that town for over 70 years. And it was very disruptive to staff and faculty. And in addition, the alumni who had been, had been educated on that campus felt very sentimental, very close, and they expressed a lot of concern and kind of pulled back and limited their engagement with the school and subsequent financial support. So at this time, there was a general fear that through this merger, the school was going to lose its unique identity and its history. So, and then the plan was for staff to move to temporary locations. We stored artwork, archives, and historical collections in a specialized storage off campus. And the plan was for a new building to be built downtown and eventually do something with the art and collections. We'll talk about that in a minute. So as we packed up our cultural heritage items, again, the staff, faculty moved to temporary space or worked remotely. The long-term plan was to move to a newly constructed Thunderbird dedicated building in the downtown ASU campus. So I'm going to come back to this idea of cultural sustainability. I think it's important to understand sort of what was at risk during this time. There was considerable changes and potential disruptions to the institution. As I said before, there was a fear that we were going to just merge and our identity, the Thunderbird's identity, was going to be lost. And so staff, faculty, and those who are kind of making these decisions realized that there was a need to really restore a sense of history, some resiliency, continuity, longevity, just to boost the school's morale and reputation. So again, it was not fun times. It was good, challenging times. So eventually, about 2 years later, the new building was complete, and it's kind of a live picture of it here, not live, but a fairly current picture of it on the corner here. And so with the construction of the new building came the opportunity to kind of start from scratch and start very deliberately and intentionally. While the building itself is advanced and has cutting edge technology throughout it, there's actually been several articles written about the level of technology in the building. The leadership of the school had a commitment to displaying the historical materials and incorporating them in the design of the building. So I worked with the school's leadership to implement this plan. And here's a little more about that plan. So we decided to install international historic photographs, archival duplicates, and the international artwork throughout the building. Each of the 5 floors would represent a geographical region of the world, as well as a chronological time period of the school's history. The first floor is the present and future, going all the way back to the school's founding on the 5th floor, and where we have our infamous pub located on that floor as well. So chronologically, you'd be going back in time as you go up the building. In addition, on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors, there are special heritage lounges that serve as a common space and highlight art from the regions. And this picture is a picture of our Africa, Middle East Heritage Lounge on the 2nd floor of the building. As I mentioned, there were historical photographs from archives. We had printed, framed. Actually, a lot of the framing and things was recycled and repurposed for this project, which saved time, saved money, and also served just that purpose of not using, materials that we didn't need to like start from scratch again. So this is a collage of photographs that are on the 4th floor of the building, which represent kind of the 1940s, 1950s history of the school. A lot of scenes you can see. What we like about this floor is that this floor is primarily the floor where faculty offices are located. So you see here, there are a lot of pictures of classrooms and students learning, and so hopefully the faculty, as they wander through these halls, they get a sense of like, hey, I'm part of something that's been going on has a long tradition. It's been going on for decades. So that's our goal there. Another image here, this is the images of the 3rd and the 4th floor. The left 2 images are from the 3rd floor, which is Asian art, and it's regions of Asia all over Asia. And then on the right, we have Latin American art in the Latin American Lounge, which is a common space for staff, faculty to make their meals. Across from this is actually sort of the kitchen, but they can also enjoy the art where they're there. So while it's hard to quantify well-being and the impact of all of this work, we can say that the response to the building's displays has been overwhelmingly positive. There was definitely a before and there was definitely an after when people felt like the building really came alive. Staff immediately expressed a sense of place and a sense of home and familiarity Newly hired staff can walk the hallways and get a sense of the school's rich history. Students are proud to walk through the hallways and show off the buildings to their families. We've had several open houses and various events where alumni are invited back to the campus. They come back, they appreciate being able to see the things that are familiar to them, were familiar to what their experience was like when they were on the campus. They recognize buildings, they recognize faculty members, they recognize all kinds of things in the photographs, especially. Alumni have been shown their appreciation. I've gotten emails, I've gotten all kinds of compliments about how they do appreciate that we've preserved the history of the institution in these ways. And I know that with all of this positivity, that alumni have been more engaged, and they're and giving donations and things like that has absolutely improved. The school's enrollment is also up. That has to do with academics as well as just that general morale. And the school is gaining a reputation in downtown Phoenix, and certainly has is well known to the community, the international community in Phoenix. So I don't know how we measure success. I feel like it was successful. People are happy with the work, and but we'll continue to look at ways that we can make it more engaging, and ways that we can work in education. We've talked a little bit about those opportunities. So there's just a lot of opportunities there. But I thank you for listening again, and thank you for the opportunity to present. Thank you, Uswa, for inviting me to be part of the panel. I appreciated everyone who spoke, and I'm happy to answer any questions. For more, you can look us up online, and we have a Facebook page that has some more photos and things. So thank you very much for letting me be here today.
Thank you, Shannon. That was such a wonderful presentation, and sharing your insights and about the case study and how important digital archiving is of cultural objects, especially in order to not lose identity, which was in the case of the Thunderbird School of Global Management, and throughout that renovation project, and redisplaying all those the history and all those cultural artifacts that are in the collection of the school. And now I'd like to conclude the first session of our conference. Thank you very much to our audience who's been watching us live through YouTube. And thank you very, very much to our esteemed speakers, Lauren Wheeler, Melody Caban, and Shannon Walker, for your valuable time, insights, and such an engaging conversation. Before we set off, I'd just like to ask, are there any concluding remarks that one of you or all of you would like to share? Nope. Okay, I guess we're good. So we'll continue our conversation with a set of new speakers tomorrow to conclude our two-day virtual conference on museums, sustainability, and well-being. Thank you, everyone, for watching us live, and take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.